All right. Well, we're going live. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Talking Landscape Photography. Very excited to be talking to you tonight about Antarctica and our Antarctica episode. It's been a long time coming. I'm sure for those of you that kind of know how long I was away and all of the journey that I was on up there, it's nice to be able to talk about it. And of course, we're joined tonight by the very illustrious Benjamin Mays. Ben, how are you doing?
Hey everyone. Yeah, good to be here tonight. Doing well, thanks.
That's very good. And you've been out shooting, been out to have any adventures or anything like that?
A little bit here and there, nothing major lately in terms of away from Sydney. I think main shoot that I really had that I was really excited about was some of the massive swell that hit the Sydney coast. Close to a month ago now, actually, probably maybe 3 weeks ago. That got probably 2 SD cards worth of that in the space of a few hours. And this 7-meter swell hitting the Sydney coast, pretty incredible. I'm sure some people saw it at least popping up on the news, if not got to see it for themselves. So currently working on a gallery of that, which I'm very excited to put out at some point soon.
Oh, awesome, mate. Yeah, it's always nice to be able to get some of that sort of work put together in a little a folio or gallery that people can actually look at. I've been quite busy down here with Dark Mofo, which has been a lot of fun.
Yes.
I was able to run a few photo walks for Sony and Camera House here, so that was really enjoyable, and ran a little workshop for bioluminescence, which is, it's always a bit hard to advertise a workshop for bioluminescence, but it was actually pretty nice that we actually got some there. So
Awesome.
we were hoping it was actually funny because it was kind of like I'd run the workshop so that we had the Milky Way as a fallback in case we didn't get any bioluminescence, but of course we got bio but no Milky Way. So but that's you can't complain too much. So it's been nice to be able to go out and do some events, and I do have some events coming up too, so keep an eye on Sony Scene. You probably might have seen in the email too, if you subscribe to our mailing list, that we have some I've got an online session coming up for nightscape theory, and also another one for nightscape editing, and they'll be both really fun, going through how to take amazing nightscape shots and also then how to edit them as well. Had my Aurora session last week and managed to have about 45 people join, which is pretty exciting. Hopefully get some more coming through on the next few as well. And then I've got a few Aurora chase workshops coming up as well. So if you go to my website and check out my workshops page, you'll just see that I'm doing very small groups, taking people out across Tasmania, and basically we're just finding the darkest skies possible. And there's no point coming to Tassie and going on a trip to Cradle Mountain if it's going to be under cloud all the time. So the idea is you can fly into Tassie and we'll just go wherever the best conditions are. So that's pretty exciting, and I'm really looking forward to having a few groups coming through and seeing what we can capture. It helps me get out there too. Otherwise, I just tend to sit by the computer trying to edit and do whatever else. So it's nice to get out there and explore. So definitely keen on those. So just check out my website, and there's a bit of information there, but they're still being brewed as we speak in a lot of ways. It's probably worth mentioning too that Paul Hole, and our co-host, who is been off gallivanting through Europe, he is having an exhibition in the Barossa Valley, when my parents have actually already been to it. It's already actually kind of opened in unofficially, I suppose, because the official opening is actually when Paul arrives, and then all three of the artists can actually talk together. So I think that's on the 16th, so it's only in a couple of days. Paul's back in the country and can have that opening of the show there in South Australia. So if you are in Adelaide or in the Barossa area, make sure you get along to Paul's exhibition opening. He's also got an artist talk and an aerial photography workshop, which would be pretty amazing to be able to attend to. It was actually really good value, I thought. I think it's only $140 or something, which is a pretty great price for the amount of information that you'll learn about taking aerial photos. So definitely check that out.
And that's alongside David Darlenberg and Tim Raitt as well.
That's right.
Also fantastic Aussie photographers.
And they've been guests of the show as well. So it's definitely really cool to see people working together and creating amazing bodies of work. My parents said that they couldn't really afford any of it, but they really enjoyed it. So that was nice. So that's probably what's been happening. But it's been a bit quiet with the auroras lately, and just getting ready to go to Port Douglas for an event for Sony, which is pretty exciting. So I might be able to talk a little bit more about that coming up. And I've also just wrapped up assisting Australian Geographic with an assignment as well. So been crazy busy, and hoping to talk a bit more about those things down the track. But it's always nice to have things happening and on the horizon.
Yeah, fantastic.
All right. Well, I guess we shouldn't keep people waiting in terms of the presentation tonight and talking about Antarctica. It's certainly a very interesting place to visit, and or in Ben's case, see from the air as well. And I've only, I think, seen a handful of shots that he's taken from the flight that he did, but they look absolutely incredible, and such an amazing land that you just you can't really imagine. So Ben, maybe give us a rundown of your experience and some of your shots.
Yeah, a quick little opener. Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to join another Sydney photographer, Will Eads, or not Sydney, he's up on the Central Coast, but Will Eads on a flight with Chimu Adventures to take some photos of one of their scenic day flights that they do from Sydney. And so, our job was just kind of to take photos for all the passengers, so they didn't have to stress about getting their own good photos. And it meant we got, amazing window seats to ourselves for the entire sort of flight. In terms of the experience, it's sort of about 7 hours to this scenic area and about 5 hours over that, and then 7 hours back. So it's a lot of transit time, but for what you're rewarded with, it's absolutely beautiful. But I shall show while I speak rather than just talking at everyone. So let me just share my screen. Can you see that all right?
Yeah, all good, man.
All righty. Most of these are just quick little edits. There's only a few highlights that I've done proper edits on. I'll just kind of take everyone through the little journey. You kind of start just seeing a whole lot of clouds and just wings of the plane and not much else. Those first glimpses of ice in the water, I'm sure, Luke, you can probably relate. Seeing those first glimpses of ice on your journey down is just such an exciting thing, even if
it's incredible.
By comparison, what you see later, it's pretty lame. But when all you've been seeing is blue for a while and you see those first patches of sea ice, it's very exciting. So this was our first sort of glimpse of this incredible mountain arm, right, just rising through the sea of clouds. So the sort of scenic area that we were traveling through was called the Trans-Antarctic Mountains. And it's just, this incredibly rugged, steep mountains on the kind of, it's an area that I believe doesn't typically get reached by boat, because it's quite a gap between the nearest mainland. And so really it's quite a unique part of Antarctica to see. It's not really one that, even though, a boat experience is so much more, immersive and beautiful, it's just an area of Antarctica that you don't get quite to see besides from these scenic day flights. The ocean just kind of reaches a point where it's just repetition of all these sheets of ice just as far as you can see, and we had these really cool streaks of cloud hovering over them to give some interest. Now, Luke, I believe I've mentioned this to you, but I'm sure anyone who's also tried to shoot out of an airplane window has experienced this too, but image quality and sharpness is a real factor to try and work around. And that's primarily for a couple of reasons. One, you're shooting through, pretty average just commercial airline perspex glass and a couple of layers of it too. Often the outer layer is a bit scratched. And so that's going to make things a little bit hazy and, bring down your image quality a little bit. I had a bird poo on mine, which I was trying to work around the entire time. So that wasn't ideal as well. that's not typical, but yeah, that was one challenge that my particular seat faced. But the primary problem is the softness created from the heat of the jet stream coming from the wings. And you can imagine what like a desert mirage sort of looks like with heat rising off the desert floor. It's like you've got a stripe of that coming through your photo, depending on where you're pointing the camera, depending on which way the plane is tilting, etc. And so often, like I might be trying to shoot something, but it'll look like it's almost totally out of focus because there's just such this soft band coming through the middle of the photo or the bottom of the top from this engine spewing out hot air. So that was a real challenge, but really you could see it a little bit through the viewfinder. And so you had to kind of wait till you could either just shoot it soft or wait till the plane moved around a bit and tilted more so you could shoot the same sort of subject at a slightly different angle and mostly avoid that soft band. So yeah, that was kind of the challenge, but everything's moving so fast as not quite as fast as a helicopter flight would be or a lower like a Cessna plane, because we're obviously a much higher scale. But even then, it was my first experience of shooting from the air where I'm not in full control of where I am. And so yeah, it was lots and lots of photos taken, quite a few SD cards filled up.
Layers.
Yeah, incredible layers.
The mood. Oh.
Yeah, just the way the sun reflected off it had this strange sort of sheen to it, just because the snow was so reflective.
Are you happy? Were you happy with how they turned out? When you do they look still pretty good when you go 100%, or do you can sort of tell?
I'll see if I can find a good example. Let's see what this one's like. So if I go to zoom in here. So I've upped the sharpness quite a fair bit, just to compensate for a bit of softness. So it's not too bad there. But you go down here and you can see there's a chunk of softness right here. I don't know if that comes through in the stream or not. But yeah, you get really fine detail and then almost like just a patch of out of focus. And yeah, so just had to apply some heavy sharpening. And there was a couple of images where I brought out the Topaz Labs AI sharpening, and that helped me a bit for compositions that I really liked but were almost unrecoverable sharpness wise. So that was a lifesaver for a couple of photos, but for the most part, like I kind of could recognize it in the field and tried to work around it.
And I guess you could crop that out if it become a problem too.
Yeah, as long as it's not intruding on the important part of the photo, it wasn't too big a deal.
I think it would almost be a function of how the windows are designed, isn't it? Like around the edges, it probably falls off just a bit like a lens does.
A little bit, yeah. I think it would have been primarily that jet stream, but I'm sure, there would have been some distortion and stuff from the windows too. Absolutely. So yeah, it's not ideal optical conditions when you're putting a really high grade lens through just scratched glass. But it's that or nothing when it comes to shooting like this.
Yeah.
So,
you don't have much of a choice. You work around it. There's not many planes that could get you down there, so I mean, you really do have to work with what you have. And did you have to do much to counter any reflections, or if it was during the day it wasn't so bad?
No, yeah. So as you know, because you've done an aurora flight, when you're doing a night flight, there's lights inside the cabin that can bounce off the inside of the windows, and you've got to get a dark cloth and a kind of suction cup around the window to avoid that. However, because we're in the day and we're shooting bright white snow under sunlight, the outside was far brighter than the inside of the plane. And so internal reflections were overpowered by the light coming in from outside. And so, yeah, didn't have any issues with reflections whatsoever.
Oh, that's amazing.
So that was, really nice to be able to not worry about that, because I think
that's very nice, because, you try at night and see how you go.
Yeah.
It's a very, very different scenario.
Yes. Yeah. And, everything is changing so fast that you almost just kind of don't have time to think about it. You just got to really, like, you see a split second sort of framing and then you just got to shoot it. And then a couple of seconds later, it's gone. And so if you don't spend those few seconds sort of framing up the composition and worrying about reflections or anything else, then you might just miss the shot entirely. And so in this case, it's better to have a slightly imperfect photo than no photo at all, or an average shot because you missed it.
Oh, completely.
Lots of cool interplay with light and shadow and shapes and contrast. I really loved this little snowy peak here rising through the darker shadows there. And just some tremendous peaks, just absolutely tremendous. And just absolutely razor sharp.
All the glacial forces.
Yeah. It was just like, yeah, just this ridge line, pinpoint, like just razor sharp, and just, yeah, amazing. And you can see there's a few issues of sharpness there. It's a bit blurry there, but it's nice and tack sharp down here. So yeah, it just became something I just had to not worry about and just take the photos that I could take. But yeah, some incredible like examples of glaciation as well. So yeah, on board the flight, it was a really cool experience, not just seeing what we got to see, but on board the flight, they offered some really cool stuff. They had radio talking to a team on the ground who were doing, I think, the first, like some expedition that was a world first, or like they were crossing the entire continent or something like that. I can't quite remember exactly, but yeah, we got to talk on radio to these guys that were on the ground in Antarctica like on a couple of occasions during the day. So that was an amazing opportunity. They also had these world-class CSIRO research happening as well, looking into solar readings, and which I think is tied in with aurora predictions and all that kind of stuff. And I think the type of machine that they had on board to detect this, they had like various versions of the same machine placed on different points on the plane. I think they said there was about 5 or 6 in the world, and they were all on the plane. Yeah, it was yeah, pretty amazing to just be there for when stuff like that's happening. So yeah, yeah, really cool examples of just, yeah, mountains with just these glaciers. They're covered in snow. Like they don't even look like glaciers because they're so thickly drenched in snow that just look like soft, billowy carpets.
Yeah, and the ice sheet would be so thick on top of that. So just imagine how tall they would be without all of the ice around. It's pretty astounding.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, again, more interplay of just kind of atmosphere and mountain layers. Some more glaciation, really cool kind of textures that we'd find down there. There were points where I wouldn't have minded. So I was shooting primarily on my 24 to 120 almost the entire time, which is, yeah, really nice and wide range. There probably would have been times where I would have liked maybe on something on the 100 plus, like 100 to 200 sort of range. Okay. But you know, there were times, because I'm shooting on the Nikon Z7 II, which is 45 megapixels. There was times where I just cropped that into DX mode, which still gives me about 21 megapixels of resolution, which is plenty. And that would give me a bit more reach for those times. But even then, I'm not sure. Let me check which focal length this was shot at. 85 millimeters. So something, you know, in the 200 to 300 millimeters would have allowed me to get right in amongst these details here. But again, it's just happening so quickly, and that's hard to kind of, you often only find those photos within the photos looking back at them later.
What sort of shutter speeds were you running with?
So pretty fast, which is more so just to combat how bright it was. I was at 2.5 thousandth of a second here, f8, 85 millimeters, and ISO 450. I can't remember why I choose that ISO. I think it was probably so fast paced I didn't have much thought behind it. But yeah, just in the thousands of a second, pretty much the entire time, just because, yeah, it was so bright. Yeah, and like some of the shapes of these peaks, just how triangulated that is, with this sea of clouds behind it. Yeah, and so this is kind of more like the backlit. So the backlit was a little bit more conventional to shoot, like more simplicity of shape and light. I quite liked how that looked. Whereas opposite, the sun gave this strange silky sort of effect. Yeah, and it's almost like you've got glaciers of clouds running through some of these areas. They kind of mimic each other, which is quite cool. I think this one's pretty soft. You can see down here relatively sharp, then up here very, very soft from that band of hot air. But I just found this repeating kind of mountain like really fascinating, like the same sort of shape repeated 5-6 times. Yeah, just some really, really interesting geological formations in those mountains there.
Oh, look at that. Wow.
It's incredible layers.
It's so surreal.
Oh. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. That one there too. I love that one. Yeah, the detail.
Yeah, and yeah, this one, like I think that might be a shadow of a cloud there. I'm not sure. but it kind of, the perspective wigs me out still, and I was the one that took it. I'm not quite sure what's going on, but yeah, really interesting stuff. That would work really well in even higher contrast sort of monochromatic edits that I haven't played with yet. Actually, here's an example of that band of softness. So up here is nice and sharp, and then you get to this chunk here where you can't even see the detail in the mountains, like the total blur, and then back down to sharpness down here. Yeah, so that's just that band of hot air coming through. That's just giving me this stripe of blurriness all the way through. But it's just ends up being something you just have to deal with.
So, are you further past the wing then?
So I was pretty much just before the rear toilets. So I was right up the back. So the wing wasn't interfering with my shooting at all, which was really nice.
Then you were probably, like, you could suggest that if you're in front of the wing, then maybe you wouldn't deal with the gas coming out of the engine that was causing the turbulent atmosphere. So it's probably might be a hot tip to try and get a seat in front of the wing for these sort of things, if you can manage it. Often if you're getting a sort of a complimentary trip, how you say it, often you don't have the luxury of choice.
Yes. So I think that'd be business class up there, and they'd very much be reserving that to paying customers. I think these things range from $1,200, where you're just standing and don't even have your own seat, through to about $8,000 if you're in a business class seat. So I was pretty happy to, have to deal with the soft band, but have a window seat to myself the entire time. So, I'll take what I can get, but business class would have it best. So if you're keen to do this sort of thing and you'll be happy to pay for that, then worth it.
It's definitely a lot quicker doing it that way than the way I'm about to tell you. That's for sure.
Yes, much quicker. I really
what was the flight time go to Woe, Ben?
I think it's 14 hours from takeoff to landing. It was a funny checking into the airport but not having to go through security or anything like that. Because arriving back in Sydney. So I felt like I was trying to get past security. Felt like I shouldn't have been there, but some more just amazing kind of glacial textures here, interplay with atmosphere. Just these, like the highlights of blue in between where the ice has crumbled down. I like to kind of get in some with the context of the wing there, and the wing is kind of mirroring this line of mountains up to the peak right at the end here. Nice big tall one. And then you got these glaciation coming down through the middle, kind of as your leading lines into the image. This was a particularly charismatic sort of ridge that just stood up like an island. This big, long sort of cruise ship of a mountain. It was awesome to see, especially in that sort of early afternoon light that we got, where it's just high, like throwing one side of it into shadow. Very, very cool to fly over. Some more of those sort of details. Again, more glaciers. I like as it went on, and I just got more and more photos of like that I'd already taken of the layers of mountains. I started to point more towards these just glacial details, which are just absolutely fascinating.
It's hard with an experience like that, isn't it, to maintain, like, because it's such a unique opportunity, and you just need to keep moving. But after a while, you feel there's a lot of repetition, and it's easy to kind of rest or not continue to work. Did you find that, or was it like the landscape changing so much that you really didn't have your mind was just always ticking over?
I think I found that I was like the moment mountains were coming through clouds, I was shooting. I found it very hard to not shoot if that was the case. I shot so far, like so much at one point that my Lexar, like fast card, like told me to stop shooting because it was heating up. I think what I did find, was forcing myself to be creative, because when you're shooting something that you're like, I don't know if I'll get the chance to do this again, or if it'll be like this again, these conditions, it's much more tempting to just shoot safe. and just get a reliable documentary sort of photo rather than anything sort of creative, because you're like, there's a worry that you'll miss that and you'll butcher the creative interpretation, and then you won't have anything good of that thing. And so that was more my struggle, was to push myself to still get unique work rather than just stuff that will document what people saw. But and trying to interpret things in a creative, unique way. But I did start to feel more confident doing that as the flight went on, because I had so many safe shots already. But yeah, especially to begin with, getting those creative shots was, felt like I was felt a lot more risky.
Yep.
Yeah. Very atmospheric sort of stuff. I liked this just sort of distant curving glacier coming through here, very pillowy. Again, just layers of atmosphere. There was a volcano that we were going to try and get down to shoot. I can't remember the name of it. It's a very prominent big volcano down there. Unfortunately, the cloud cover was too low. So we started heading down towards it, and they're like, no, we're going to have to turn back. So we circled back to similar sort of Trans-Antarctic mountain areas that we'd been to before. But there was no complaints from me with that. Again, some more textures. It's the wing. This looks like some sort of extant volcano. I don't know if it actually is, but it's it got that sort of shape to it.
Definitely
Wouldn't be surprised. Now there's some later shots that kind of get towards a bit more of the highlights. Yeah, kind of around now starts to become a few more of my favorites of the shoot. So yeah, there was a couple of really charismatic peaks that really just stood apart really nicely. These two sticking through these kind of lenticular clouds here, with all this glaciation in the back, was really, really cool to see. And we kind of just circled all the way around them, and the further around we got from this perspective, the better and better they looked. I loved this shot for kind of the subtle leading line coming right through the middle, and if only they were poking through the clouds a little bit more, but still lots of just kind of shrouded in mystery. And then we've got another big one even further back there, lots of sort of visual continuation all the way through to the frame. And then, as we came further around, it's just these spectacular couple of peaks with great framing on the bottom and top.
Amazing.
This one sort of reminded me of like some sort of crown. I think that's the same formation there. Keep moving through. Some more, also really interesting details. Looking down at those ice sheets too, some just fascinating textures. There was a bit more of a sort of portal shot, or like through the window.
That's cool.
I liked that. Kind of a bit more immersion into what it's like to be there in person, sort of thing. So that's just classic plain window you're looking out of. And again, just layers and layers and layers. Let's keep going. Like, just the flowing on sort of slopes here, repetition, amongst some really, really grand peaks. This one had a great shape to it. And there's just, they're just these mountains that, like if they were in British Columbia or somewhere like that, they would be shot to death.
They'd be iconic. Yeah.
They'd be these iconic world-renowned photos like that. Sorry, mountains. They'd be like K2 and stuff. But they're just a dime a dozen down here. There's one every 10 seconds. And it's just, the concentration of just incredible scenery is amazing. This little crack in the ice reminded me of a stingray, or a manta ray. Kind of got the little things that poke out the front there, and the shape of it here, and the tail along there. And more sort of ice sheets. Very interesting swirling textures in the ice. This was more a glaciated sort of area rather than the ice sheets. This was between mountains, and they'd just be, you know, kilometers across, like in terms of scale right here. Like it's just such massive scale, but you just can't even tell when you're that far up. Just a huge expanse. This is the shot I've got in my background here. This is probably one of my favorites from the trip, from the shoot. Yeah, this really, really great pointy peak here with a couple of like framed nicely with two sort of subordinate peaks either side of it. You've got atmosphere scattered throughout. You've got really nice spacing between, you know, these layers and the clouds between them. And yeah, just a really, you know, attention grabbing scene that, you know, I sort of fired off many, many frames when we circled around into this view. I don't think this is my sharpened version, but you can again tell this how soft. So like here's the really nice tack sharp bit, which thankfully was on the actual peak. But then you get down to this area here, and, you know, again, the band of cloud just completely muddies the detail. And so thankfully that just kind of gives a little bit of if it's positioned right, like it is here, it almost gives like a shallow depth of the field sort of look. And so you can use it to your favor, but there are other times where it was just really detrimental and hard to work around. So I was very, very glad that this frame worked with that. This was another favorite. So we had a bit of cloud iridescence in this high cloud here. Or either that or a sun or a sundog or something like that. In the ice
refraction through the ice crystals.
Yeah. So that was really cool to see through there. And yeah, I've seen them from the ground naturally, but not through the air before. So I don't really know how the science of that works. But yeah, so if anyone does know how that would work, feel free to send me a message on Instagram or make a comment down in the YouTube. But yeah, some really, really cool stuff to see, and just this great glacier with that reflecting light. This was another favorite too. This is very shortly after this photo. You can see that same sort of iridescence in the ice crystals there, but then just these great sort of layers continuing up through here, and just such great detail that you can find all the way through. Really, really fascinating. And yeah, just again, layers and layers and layers. That's probably the end of the mountain sections. Fine, just to sort of cap it off, I was having a lot of fun with these ice sheets, and you'll notice that there's kind of a rainbow color in the water here. Now, that is a result of the coating or whatever it is on the window pane glass within the plane, and it's not really very noticeable if you're not using a filter. But if you put on a circular polarizer filter, it actually exacerbates it like tenfold. It just brings out these crazy rainbow colors, and especially if you point kind of down really towards the bottom of the window, so you're shooting quite sharply down, it really becomes very, very apparent. And so, there were a fair few situations where that just looked a bit weird and tacky and like a mistake, but there was other times like where you could get the colors between ice sheets that actually made a really cool creative effect. So I had a bit of play with that, with some different effects. So here's a non-polarized version, just nice and simple with dark blue water between the ice sheets. And then here's a polarized one where, the sun's reflecting through and you're getting these little hints of color between the ice sheets rather than dark blue water. That's probably my favorite example. These really cool rainbow colors coming through, very, very abstract. And yeah, it just kind of turns into a big bright glow at the back there. But yeah, and you can see just how endless these ice sheets were as well. So yeah, I had a fair bit of fun playing around with that. Creating some abstracts. Those who know my work know that I love those abstracts and details and repeating patterns and all that kind of stuff. So I was having a great time.
In your element.
Yeah, absolutely. Really liked this one with kind of the interplay of the clouds there. And yeah, this is just on the way back to Sydney. Beautiful sunset across these clouds and the ocean, nice and golden, capturing that sort of heavenly glow. And that's about it for me.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much for that. And it's just, I don't know how many amazing shots there were there, but it must be hard to pick a favorite out of all of those because there's just so many amazing scenes. Are you looking to put a gallery together or I guess, I don't know, have you released many of these images? I feel like we're seeing a bit of a sneak peek
I put
here.
them on Instagram. I put some highlights on Instagram. So kind of like these three I've shared. And I think another one further back too. And this one as well. So I've shared those four to the socials. I haven't put any on my website yet. I did say I'd put together a gallery at some point.
I did see that. We're still waiting.
On the back burner currently. I think I'll really have to fine tune the process, and I think that the idea of sharpening has put me off the idea, but it will be out there at some point. But this episode can be a placeholder for now. So yes, enjoy these because this is the first look that anyone besides the people that were on that flight have experienced any of those photos, these photos before, minus the four that I had already shared.
And there's really not that many people that would have seen that at all. Really, I'd really be, surprised if there'd be a, do you know how many flights have done that kind of trip? I'd imagine it's, you're in a very really small group of people.
They're doing even less this year because I think just a bit of an economic pinch that, people aren't booking as much. So they're doing less this year. And I think they're also just very busy with their actual, their boat expeditions and stuff that they haven't really had the capacity to run them as much too. So I think last year was just a particularly strong year for them, and they did a fair few of them. So I'm very, very grateful to the Chimu team for bringing me on board. And I was due to be back on board in November, but that's had to be postponed, unfortunately. I think they just haven't had the capacity to run it, unfortunately. But these things happen. And I'd love to.
I spoke to Chimu because Chimu's actually I think Intrepid own Chimu, or there's some sort of arrangement there. Don't quote me on that. But the last trip that I did in Antarctica was actually a Chimu branded trip, even though it was run by Intrepid. And it was quite interesting that because Chimu's first and foremost like a South American travel company, and as you'll hear, Antarctica is a good extension from that. What happened during COVID is there was a lot of people stranded after the trips, and so they actually had to charter some planes to get the people back from South America to Australia, and it was quite a big campaign they had to do, and there was quite a lot of had to get the politicians involved and help to subsidize the flight back because it was very expensive. And through the exercise of them chartering these planes, is my understanding that gave them the sort of understanding and know-how to run these sort of flights. And so during COVID they were able to still run the flights because obviously you couldn't travel, leaving Sydney, going back to Sydney is quite okay if you're not allowed to go internationally. So that gave them an opportunity to do the Aurora flights and these sort of Antarctic flights as well. So but I guess with their core business being the the Antarctic and the other travel and that being back on, I can understand how that could have backed off a little bit. And I guess with any sort of a long haul flight like this, there is a carbon impact as well, and I'm sure that's front of mind for a lot of people as well that are looking to have an experience. So you can definitely count yourself lucky, mate, that you got the experience there.
Yeah, very, very grateful to the team. They were fantastic, and something I didn't mention as well. Dr. Joe V. Johnson was someone else that was on board amongst the team, and he's probably in his 70s now, or something like that. And he was an actual expedition leader in the 90s, I think. Like he was telling us stories about how he's fallen in a crevasse and all this stuff. He was loving the photos too. So it's really cool to be amongst actual Antarctic legends. there was someone there who was a relative of someone who's had their name or several areas in Antarctica named after them, and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, no, it was really, really cool experience, and yeah, even on top of the photos. So yeah, if anyone does get the chance, I can really highly recommend Chimu for their services and the way they go above and beyond to just provide a really unique world-class experience with Antarctica, whether that's from the air or from the sea.
Yeah, and speaking of, I should probably launch into my side of things now. Yeah, where do I begin? Well, basically, I was really lucky to work with Intrepid Travel the end of last year, and then at the start of this year as well. So I left Australia around the 17th of December, and only got home on Australia Day. So I was away for over 4 weeks. As you'll see, the travel is quite extensive to get down to where you to even first depart from. So I might even just show you on a map just to give a bit of an idea of that to start with. So I'm just going to have a look at some Google Earth here and see how we go. So basically we've got when you start, and I have to start down here, and you think, oh, the quickest way would probably be just to go down like that. And in some ways you'd be right, but if you have, my understanding is if you go by boat, it's 4 or 5 days potentially, and it took me 4 or 5 days to get there, but going a different way. So you probably get there in the same time, even if you do sail from Hobart anyway, which is kind of funny because obviously there's some air journeys involved. So the area of Antarctica that most tourist sort of operations, I guess, would visit is actually not the part that's due south of Tasmania. In fact, it's actually right on the other side, and we're actually looking here at the Antarctic Peninsula. I'll just flip that around to the north because that makes a bit more sense for people. And so yeah, we've got Tassie all the way over here, and the southern part of Argentina and Chile is over here. And so you actually leave from a little town in here called Ushuaia, and that's on the Beagle Channel, which is this channel that comes in here at the bottom here. Unfortunately, it's not maps are loading a bit slower than I'd like at the moment, but there you go. So to get down there, you actually are on a bit of a journey as well, flying from Hobart. Then I had to do a layover in Sydney. And then you actually fly from Sydney all the way over to, you actually generally land in Santiago, which I think is in here. And then from Santiago, you actually fly across to Buenos Aires, which I think is down here. So I just happened to land in Buenos Aires about an hour after Argentina won the World Cup. So it was absolute. I've never seen such a big party or chaos or anything in my life. It's like something from a movie.
I remember seeing that in your Instagram stories. It was
insane, and the scale of this city is just something to behold. It is a massive city, and I think it's 15 million from memory. It's huge, and so to have the whole city to stand still, and basically I was staying at the right in the center, which is where the obelisk is, which is the really famous landmark, and so that was kind of, I think that's it up there actually. So anyway, it was quite the experience. I wouldn't recommend it necessarily because it was very chaotic, and I got to my hotel after waiting at the airport for I think I waited at the airport for about 4 to 5 hours for a taxi before we tried to commandeer a Uber to get into town, because all the taxis were saying that they couldn't make it in, but the Uber driver had no problem getting in. So I don't know what that was about. But then finally got to the hotel after dodging a pack of inebriated people, and then they told me that there was no they didn't have my name down for that night as a booking.
Oh,
And I was
geez.
completely wrecked by that point because I'd basically been traveling for 36 hours straight and all of that. So thankfully they had a room for me because I couldn't go out in the street with the amount of firecrackers and everything that was going on, because I was literally about, 200 or 300 meters from the actual epicenter of the party.
Jeez.
So I couldn't, it was firecrackers and just the roar of the crowd all night. It was unbelievable. So thankfully they could look after me, and
Yeah.
I stayed there actually another day. I guess it's a very good idea to have a layover, just in case you have some delays on your travel. They were talking about having some strikes with Qantas, so I was a little bit worried, but as it turned out, it was the World Cup that was really the interesting thing. So I actually flew into one airport, had a couple of days there, and then ended up flying out of the domestic airport. So then you fly. So I'd imagine most trips you would be going through Buenos Aires if you're going to be doing this. I'm assuming you can also travel from Santiago in the Chile side. But certainly most people I could see were going through Buenos Aires. It's a really interesting city, and I hope to I might show a few shots just even from that, because it's a nice little add-on. I guess the other natural add-on to a trip like this would be to do Patagonia, which is in here, and I'm hoping if next time I go over this way to also tack on Patagonia, because it is really so close to Ushuaia. So yeah, you fly from Buenos Aires down to Ushuaia down here, which is I think about a three or so hour flight. And then you can see it's quite an interesting landscape in its own right, with all the glaciers and everything going on around the place. So there's some really beautiful walks even around Ushuaia, so you could quite easily spend a bit of time there. And I actually was able to take a scenic flight, which I just realized I didn't even include any photos of. I took 35,000 images on the trip. Wow. You're really only seeing a very, very small tip of the iceberg tonight. And I have to admit that most of the shots are probably a little bit more operational, because they're the ones I've edited for Intrepid, and more to show the story of the actual trip, rather than them being necessarily portfolio images or anything like that. So just keep that in mind in terms of it's not what I would say like my finished sort of print files that I'd be putting on the wall. They're much more just storytelling images, so just keep that in mind. But basically, yes, you've got a bit of a wharf here, which in Ushuaia, which is where all of the ships are actually launching from, and you can see a few cruise ships in here on the satellite, ready to go as it is. That you don't stay in dock very long, so the ship will be in the morning, everyone gets off, and then 3 p.m. everyone will get back on for the next voyage, and it's gone again. So the ship doesn't even stay overnight, generally speaking, in Ushuaia, because it's actually quite expensive for the ship to be docked there. I think I heard some pretty, tens of thousands of dollars, US dollars, for them to be docked there. So because there's a lot of ships have a demand there. So it's a very, very remote place. As I zoom out, you'll sort of get a concept of that. Interestingly, you could go maybe through here, as it's a bit shorter to get out, but that's all Chilean land, and so I don't think they allow anyone to use that channel. So you have to actually go all the way through here, and then come out down here through the Beagle Channel. So you sort of start your voyage from Ushuaia in the evening, and then it's sort of the sun's setting as you leave the Beagle Channel. It's quite beautiful actually. And then you're at sea then for a couple of days once you're leaving Ushuaia. So it can take I think essentially 2.5 days to actually get down there. So crossing the Drake Passage, which is a kind of a notorious stretch of water, because you've kind of got there's an Antarctic current that's all of the world's weather moves around the island, and so it's all getting compressed through this little gap here, and so all of some pretty foul weather through here, and you get huge waves as well. So they have a term called the Drake Shake for that, which is you basically rocking about and 10-meter waves, and the sort of ones where if you if you're not propping yourself up, then you could fall over pretty easily. So yeah, it's pretty interesting times, but it's actually really good on the boat as you go over to photograph seabirds. They follow the boat really closely. So when I say boat, it's definitely a ship, not a boat. And I'll show you some of those sort of shots as well. And I'll go into the detail there. I just thought it's kind of a bit crappy to kind of switch between a map and photos all the time. So basically we're visiting this target area here which is known as the Antarctic Peninsula. And basically on the first voyage, we got as far south as down here, which is actually inside the Antarctic Circle. Most of the time, you're not even getting as far south as the Antarctic Circle.
Yeah.
So that's just worth noting. It was just like every day, it's like more south, more south, more south. But then if you zoom out, there's still like way more south to go if you really could. So it's the other interesting thing, just because you might naturally think about auroras or things like that being in a polar environment, but because the south magnetic pole is actually really skewed across Australia. I think it's around this sort of area towards Australia. All of the auroras are forming in an oval more like that. So you can sort of see that's drawing the aurora away from the Antarctic Peninsula, and so generally speaking, you don't really see any auroras. Because of the magnetic pole being very skewed towards Australia, but B, you're normally there in summer, so the days are very, very long. And in fact, I was lucky enough to see the midnight sun. And so it's never getting dark enough to actually see the aurora during at least the tourist time anyway. You would need a very, very big event, I think, to see it in Ushuaia just based on that. But ironically, if you were to overlay where Hobart is, I think Hobart would be up here somewhere in terms of the latitude. So I think even Patagonia is further south than what Hobart is. So it's quite interesting. I mean, it'd be amazing if you could get auroras in Patagonia, I'm sure, but it probably wouldn't happen. So anyway, that's just an interesting thing.
It did happen. We would have seen it from Mark Adamus already. So
yeah, that's right.
I don't think we have.
There's a few features to point out as well, just while we're looking at this. We've got obviously Ushuaia here, and then we're heading down to the Antarctic Peninsula, but we do have an island over here called South Georgia Island. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go there, but that is I'm really hoping to get back there. And I mean, I have been asked to come back, so that's pretty exciting. And so hopefully I get a chance to go there. But who knows? It's there's only generally 2 trips a year that Intrepid do there. And then there's also the Falkland Islands as well, which if you're doing a South Georgia trip, you'll actually go Ushuaia, the Antarctic Peninsula, then go across to South Georgia to the Falklands, and then back to Ushuaia again. So you do a really big loop, whereas normally the trips you're doing are just down, kind of having a look around and then going back up again. So it's a very, very different sort of trip. And so you might see the price of the South Georgia trips and, fall off an armchair and maybe keep going until you go through the next level of the house. But that's why, because I think it's 21 days on this vessel, and you're really in, some of the ridiculously remote place and very foreign place. Even when we were really far south down here, we didn't see any other ships the whole time, so it was a very surreal feeling to kind of be in a space where it's just you, and you sort of feel quite vulnerable, I suppose, in some ways. So that's just a bit of something to look at. And I guess what I can do is just show what I did on the first trip, which was the journey to the Circle. And so we came in through the Gerlache Strait here. We actually went straight south straight away to make the best of the weather that we had. And so by the 3rd day, we'd already passed through the Lemaire Channel. And then we actually, by the 4th or the 6th day, we're actually really far south down at Stonington and in Marguerite Bay here, which is, if we switch back to the map, right down in this sort of area here. So generally speaking, you're not really going to get much further south than that, because the ice gets thicker as well, and you're already so many days away from Ushuaia as it is if something goes wrong. The amount of risk just intensifies. And so then you've also got the Weddell Sea on this side. So sometimes there's also trips that take you into the Weddell Sea on this side of and you can actually come up and around and go in through here, and there's some pretty cool stuff in here as well. So that's another itinerary that you can do. That was the map there. And so that gives a bit of an outline. The second trip we did something similar where let's have a look. This voyage here, you can see we didn't go anywhere near as far south because this was just an expedition to the Antarctic Peninsula. So we just went in through to a few of the key points. There's really certain landing sites that you go to that are most quite commonly visited, and each ship has a list of sites that they're allowed to land on. And so you do tend to go to some similar places, but every trip I went somewhere different. And you'll also see that this itinerary here is expedition to the Antarctic Peninsula, but then the third trip was also the same itinerary. Where is it? That's being painful. Oh, is it this one here? That's the end of that. I can see it here. Oh, it's opening in the wrong window. That's what's going on. Oh, sorry about that. So this is the third trip. So you can see we got much further north than we did on the second one, which is this one here. So if I put these side by side, well, you can do it. Maybe you can't. No, that'd make it too easy, wouldn't it? All right. Well, anyway, there we go. And then the other one was this one here. So you can see that they're very different. We came in from the bottom here, moved along, and then actually came out the top way on the last trip I did. Whereas the second one we came in and went out the same. Oh, it's only showing the one. Oh no, it's showing both. So really, what I'm trying to illustrate there is, even though it's the same trip, it makes it sound like it's called a different name because it's this one was a Chimu trip, but even though it's the same itinerary, you actually end up always doing something different. And so that's the thing that I found really interesting. I just assumed that it'd just be the same thing you're doing, cut and pasted each time, but the reality is that the weather is so fickle and changes so much that you really can't afford to do the same thing. I mean, and I kind of know that from even being in Tassie. You're really dictated by the weather, what you do, not really by anything else. And so that's just something to always consider, that you can't really hope to go somewhere. And that's why if you look at an itinerary of an Antarctic trip, it probably won't be very specific. It'll just say how many days and what you might see. And that's why, because they really can't guarantee anything. You can see that you visit a whole bunch of different places at a whole bunch of different times. And so I was just telling Ben earlier that now that it's been a few months, it's actually going to be a little bit hard for me to remember what place was what. So if anyone out there's had a lot of experience in Antarctica, I do apologize, because even though I felt like I had a lot of experience for the few weeks that I was out there, realistically, I'm still trying to get my head across it all. I thought I'd just show a couple of videos just to illustrate the experience as well. Let's go to loop view here. And that's going to hopefully not crash. It's always nice when it doesn't do that. Oh, there we go. So this is, I on the boat in Ushuaia. I took a GoPro, which I very highly recommend if you ever do one of these things. The GoPro is a really awesome little tool to have, and it's you can just set it up. But the thing I really enjoyed the most about it was using it for time lapse. Here we go. This is just a little time-lapse clip of I set it up and just sort of wanted to get a shot of the vessel leaving the dock there at Ushuaia. You can sort of see the beautiful backdrop of all of the mountains that you have there. And I am intending to put all of the videos that I've taken together to do some sort of like time-lapse video about Antarctica, but yeah, that's going to take a little bit of time, I think. So let's see if I can get more to an action, or I've gone too far now. It would be really nice if the video aspect of things was a bit better in Lightroom, but it really isn't. Oh, it must be getting pretty close now. There we go, just taking off. And it's a pretty amazing feeling to launch off like that, and only 9 days, or my first trip was 12 days later, you're going to be back. And so it's a long it's a long time to be away from shore like that. So it's a pretty cool feeling to be off and on your way. So I might as well show some videos what it's like when you actually get there. This is an example of one of the days that we had. It's Espen, the expedition photographer. You really, you get a bit of choppy water and can see the horizontal snow and everyone trying to cover up their cameras. This is the photography boat. One thing that they'll provide for you is jackets, but they don't provide the pants. And this is a good sort of example of why it's a good idea to pack some really good pants, because I think this is the video I'm thinking of. You can get hit by waves and everything is just completely saturated straight away. Let's see if I'm pretty sure he just gets slammed. Probably won't now. Anyway, it might be the one beforehand. Yeah, oh, well, it doesn't matter. The point is that you definitely want to make sure that your pants are suitable for a trip like that, because you'll get wet and you'll get freezing.
Not the kind of environment where you want to skimp on gear.
This is a really quick hyperlapse I did just to show getting on board. So the ship will open up a gangway and you basically will get in that way. This is sort of leaving from there and heading out onto a trip. And so I really enjoyed doing these little time lapses, just as love watching the boat just disappearing in the distance as you're sort of going off on your adventure. You can see again kind of a more miserable day. A few people looking a little bit kind of like getting a bit cold already. I mean, the average temperature is probably about 0 to 2, so it is very, very chilly. This is another one coming back in. It was fun to play with the different timing settings and things as well, just to get these sort of shots. You can see the boats are having to always navigate around ice, and that's sort of a good example of the gangways coming down and then how they all come in and then start unloading back into the boat again. So you're basically living on these zodiacs as you're doing all of the adventures. And so a lot of the shots that I'm about to show is around that. I think the last this is just another one coming back into the vessel as well. It's a pretty amazing sight, having this big ship just in the middle of these massive bays and with the huge colossal mountains in the distance. You really get a bit of an idea of the size. But the really interesting thing is that some of the days, like the second trip, which is I think when this was taken, the the cloud was actually pretty much around the whole time. And so I just remember remarking that so many people would have not even known how big some of the mountains actually were that were around, because they were covered the whole time. And that can definitely happen. So I'll hopefully be able to show you some shots. There's also a bit of a standard kind of thing that happens on all Antarctic trips, and that's called the polar plunge. And this is actually me doing my polar plunge. So you actually, jumping into the ice cold water, and it's all sorts of interesting thoughts going through your mind before you do something like this. But definitely glad that I did do it, and I actually felt amazing afterwards. So if you ever do get down there, make sure you do the polar plunge. They gave me a shot of vodka afterwards, and I'm sure it was more than just the standard size. Definitely went down quite nicely. And you do feel like a bit of a warm up, so that's good. Just obviously snow at sea level is always a bit of a treat. So beautiful. Some days you'll get snow, and other days it's clear, so it's nice just to look around. This is some of the sort of brash ice that we went through on a particular day. This gives you an idea of the sort of types of ice and conditions that you're sort of going through. And this is the photography boat that we were on. I'll explain a little bit more about my role on board in a sec as well. But basically,
when you say photography boat, is that with like just paying participants that are photographers, or is that the dedicated photography team?
Well, I might as well mention about it now. So I was on board kind of through a partnership with Sony Australia and Intrepid. And so Intrepid have a photography program on their boat. And to my knowledge, it's kind of one of the only ones where there's a dedicated photography group that's actually got guides that are paid by the operator, which is Intrepid in this case. They've actually got 2 photo guides, 2 dedicated photo boats, and 20 participants. And so what they do is they send down a whole kit of Sony equipment, so enough for 1 camera each plus lenses. And my job was to administer like the loan program to make sure that everyone had all the right cameras that they wanted, and then on top of that, help them use the cameras and make sure the settings were okay and that people were getting the shots that they're happy with. And if they weren't, it was all my fault. No, but I was helping them out to get the shots that they were really hoping for. Because if you're spending all that money to go down to a place like this, you really do want to be able to take the shots you're hoping for. And so rather than having, I think her camera was just a kit sort of rebel sort of camera, a Canon sort of crop sensor, and she ends up shooting with an A9 and a 100 to 400 instead. So you can imagine the how much better the images would be. And it's quite interesting because for the cost of what one of these trips are, it probably is also what the cost of the camera would have been if she had to buy it to come along as well. So you're actually saving a lot of money if you think about it from that perspective too. So it's a pretty amazing offering, actually. I think it is an extra amount to spend to be on the photography program versus just being a standard person on board, but being able to borrow very high-end Sony equipment, and then have an advocate like myself there to help use that equipment. And then you've also got professional photo guides. This is my mate Jason here, who used to at one time be the official photographer for the Canadian Prime Minister, and also the official photographer for the Canadian Winter Olympics as well. So you're working with some really amazing photographers on board as well. So it's quite a special experience from that perspective too. So they really have put a pretty amazing crew together, and it sort of given me goosebumps actually, just sort of being involved with that team, because it is a truly international and very professional team that run these sort of things. And I'm working very hard myself actually to be able to work down there in that capacity as well, which hopefully, fingers crossed, will happen next Antarctic season. I couldn't get all of my paperwork together for this one, but this is just so this is the whole crew here, and still use your phones as well, of course. And then I think I decided to pop the GoPro in and just see what it looked like from underneath as well. Cool. Obviously pretty good to do too if there's any like a seal or anything like that under the water as well. I saw some pretty amazing footage of people that got minke whales and leopard seals and all sorts of things by just dunking in a GoPro. So definitely worth having something like that to play around with. Nothing particularly interesting there, but it's certainly nice B-roll too for any sort of film that you want to put together as well. So it's just a few little videos that I took. I took so many actually, and it's not really much point sort of showing all of the little clips. It's obviously a better idea to show the
keen to see some photos.
Yes, the photos. So that I just wanted to get all of the video out the way while I could. So let's just go to the second screen. F11. That's just have to edit my preferences because it's showing up on the wrong monitor. I'm sorry about this. I knew that using Lightroom to present this would be a mistake, and I think it is. Sorry about that. It's not made for presentation, it's made for editing. All right, here we go. So I'll just bring up the collection that I was going to show. So let's just get that screen back. There we go. All right, so these are a few shots from the time I was there, and I mean it's the ships. I'm just trying to get the ship always has a flag at the front, so it was a nice start to have that there. But I guess the first part of any sort of photo trip in Antarctica is probably going to be photographing the seabirds, because you're in the ocean at sea for at least 2 days at the start. But it actually provides you a really excellent opportunity to be able to get really close to these amazing albatross. And I mean, you can just get these pin sharp shots. They don't come as close to the boat as you'd like a lot of the time, but when they do, and you've got it all lined up ready to go, it was pretty special. And I do have a few others. That's a wandering albatross. I think this one's a black-browed albatross, and you really do get to know the birds quite well, because it's one of the major features, I suppose, of a trip down there. And so I was stoked because I've always wanted to get good shots of birds like albatross. I love albatross personally, and so having them come really close to the boat like that just makes it really easy. And you've got a lot of deck time, so you can just be out there all day if you like, if the weather's okay, trying to shoot them and photograph them in different positions. And one thing I didn't manage to get any examples of, but I do have some shots where I was doing panning, and so I'd actually put it like a 30th of a second or so, and actually follow the bird and try and time it so you actually had the bird sharp at the background moving. It's very hard to get one that works.
What sort of focal length would this be? A few hundred mil, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely. So I used a 100 to 400 a lot of the time. Every now and then it would be a 24-105, but pretty much always my 100 to 400. But when I go back, I think I'm going to take a 200 to 600. I've got the sort of luck that if I'm running the Sony program, I kind of know what spare lenses there are, so I do have the opportunity to also use what's in the kit as well, which is definitely a massive perk. But generally speaking, they actually didn't have a 200 to 600 on board, so I'm really hoping that I'm going to buy one, I think, specifically for it anyway. I think my friend Jay took a 200 to 600, and that worked quite well. And my cameras were an A7R4. And an A7 IV and an A7R5, but I also had access to A9s and a few other things using the equipment in the kit as well. Obviously, I made sure that the participants in the program had first call, so don't think that I was getting in the way. But yeah, it was pretty cool. So this is actually the very first taste of Antarctica that we had. You basically kind of like all of a sudden you're there. I think the way it actually happened was we were we arrived very early in the morning, and basically you wake up and you're there kind of thing. So it's like Christmas time, and it it can be a bit hard getting up sometimes, especially if you're feeling a little bit seasick. Thankfully, my stomach handled it really, really well, but I know for a lot of other people it was a lot more challenging. But yeah, just some of the I always saw this almost like a nun's head or something, or like it's a very interesting sort of feature. So really dramatic, dynamic moody weather when we first arrived there. It's nice to get a few shots of the people enjoying it too. From memory, on the first trip, we actually went straight down, which one was it? The Lemaire Channel. So so that was sort of looking at all of that. Oh, that's the Lemaire Channel there, just entering that. Lemaire Channel is kind of one of the, I guess, iconic sort of passages of water to go through, because you've got these kilometre high. It's like almost every mountain there's Mitre Peak at Milford Sound. So you're just looking around, but they're all like Mitre Peak. And then you just go through this channel, which is relatively narrow, but quite deep. And you've got these amazing mountains on either side. And I will have some shots of that coming up a bit later. And I think this is towards the end.
Look at that.
So that's an infrared image of at the end of the Lemaire there. And then once we got to the end of the Lemaire, we stayed there for the night, and it had a beautiful found this beautiful ice arch there when we were out in the Zodiacs. Just a bit of a shot of the boat there, and then it's nice to line up people with arches and different features. You can see, I think it's Hoogard Island or something here, and you've got the all of the people. So there's quite a lot of people when you get onto shore. So the good thing about being on the photo program was that we often left first. So our Zodiac boats were always the first out, so we could get onto shore without any other footprints or not any others, but much less people in the way.
Nice.
And that was always quite nice. And then it was also nice getting back on board first, so you could sort of unwind a little bit and not getting back too late. So you're generally doing they'd call it like an operation. They're doing 2 operations or Zodiac sort of expeditions a day, weather permitting. Or you have a sea day where you're actually traveling between locations, and you're probably out for about 2 hours or so, maybe half an hour to an hour of that's actually on land, and then another hour or so actually out on the photo or on the Zodiac cruise as well. Beautiful reflections there. We had really nice weather on the first trip. It was really quite a beautiful thing. It was nice to just get some shots showing the sense of scale of the boat in the surrounding landscape, and here you've got all of the kayakers there with the towering mountains behind. It was definitely the thing about Antarctica that surprised me the most was how much, at least on the Antarctic Peninsula, how many mountains there actually were, how mountainous it was. I had no idea that it was just so astoundingly huge. It was really a surprise. It's nice to sort of get a bit of juxtaposition, or just it might be more of a confronting sort of shot, talking a bit about tourism in Antarctica. But I mean, just commenting on that, the tourism, the way they handle it and the way they communicate around being responsible and looking after the environment is like nothing you'll ever see, really. It's the amount of integrity that they have around biosecurity was extremely strict. You'd always be putting your feet in disinfectant every time you went off and on again. You weren't even allowed to crouch to take a photo. You couldn't sit down at all on the land there, just because they're worried about bird flu and the potential of spreading that. So they were very strict around how you manage movement and things like that. So which I thought was really impressive.
That's really good.
Very well organized. I love these sort of reflection type shots where you get the like then the golf ball dimpling of the ice there with the reflections there below.
Those little ripples are almost perfect, like this. It's like the generated ripple filter in
It
Photoshop.
is. It does look like that, and I think I don't know if it's something to do with how cold the water is, but you definitely get these pretty amazing sort of ripples. I really enjoyed actually photographing the actual operation itself as well. I mean, I kind of had to do that as part of just to deliver stuff to it for Intrepid anyway. I mean, but obviously it's interesting to capture everything as it happens. And this is the photo boat here. They're just sort of might be looking for a whale or something like that. There's Jacob there and his boat. You can see some of the kayakers sort of coming back in there. So just nice to show that scale and some of the just really like they're really ice sculptures more than icebergs. Some of the shapes and the design, like how they look and the colors. It's very, very hard to you do your best to capture it. This is just a detail shot of some ice on the side of a mountain, but just always nice to have those sort of things if you want to do it as a textured overlay or anything like that for some text. That's my friend Jason, who was one of the two photography guides for the program. When I was on there, they do have different guides at different times depending on what's going on. I think you can see me there taking a photo with the rest of the crew. Bit of resolution there.
Selfie.
Just a bit more of the boat and stuff. We've got some more ice and some of the mountains with the dreamy landscape vibes and the clouds coming through.
Gorgeous.
I actually really only did infrared on the first voyage. The second two, it was just not enough direct light for it at all. Like you really do need some direct light for infrared. But I tell you what, if it's on song, the IR was just coming up incredible.
Yeah.
Just being able to get the layers and some of the sort of effects of the light on the ice look very, very different in infrared. So definitely a cool thing to play with. You can take the same shot. I've probably got some examples here where it's the same thing in IR and color and very different. I really enjoyed photographing from the front of the boat just to show where the boat was in the land in the seascape, I guess you could say. A bit more infrared. I really like this one as well.
That's beautiful.
Really interesting sort of three-dimensionality and depth as well with some of this sort of stuff. Some little huts there with the mountains behind. And then this is pretty much the color version of the same scene, so you can see how different the feeling is. And I don't know if I could say I like one more than the other, but I mean the color's pretty nice too. The little old huts here it must be some sort of station. I can't quite recall which one it would be. And then just more layering. It almost looks like there's two images there, but you've got that low cloud that can really help to create some separation.
Luke, Anne in the comments has very generously volunteered to be your assistant for the next trip.
There you go. We'll have to have a chat with Intrepid and it's definitely something good to try for. There's I just really enjoyed. I think this is actually a phone shot. I took quite a lot of phone shots as well. And these days the resolution with the phone, you almost don't know the difference anyway. Just really liked I obviously did a few shots just to capture the people taking photos, obviously, because that's part of the reason I was there. Pretty magnificent. This is getting quite.
I really liked that one prior, the one just before.
Yeah,
that's gorgeous.
Yeah, the one thing I really struggled with was I don't think there's birds like. Oh no, that bird is sharp, but quite a lot of the time you'd take a shot and the bird would be out of focus because there was so much depth there that you'd either have to pick to have the bird sharp or the landscape sharp. So I don't know if that's just
a bit blurry there in that case.
Well, no, I think it is slightly. No, it's not.
It's pretty good.
It's actually not too bad. It probably is a bit more biased towards the bird. I probably was focusing on the bird actually, so maybe it was just a bit further away, so the focus isn't so bad. But I think in this example, or maybe it's the same scenario. The bird's out, but the landscape's sharper. So it's sort of hard to know which way to go sometimes. But I'd imagine that it's probably better to go with a sharper landscape, or try and get both elements and blend it back if that's your cup of tea. Just a few more. It was certainly getting really far south now on this particular trip, sort of heading towards the furthest south that we actually got on the whole trip. Really stunning, some of the best weather we had, really. And this is where the infrared really just went to the next level. This is the title image of the show. You can sort of see that, you go through these patches where there's quite a lot of ice around, and so you go up to the bridge and the captain's sweating it a little bit. I don't think they particularly enjoy it. There's plenty of stories about ships hitting icebergs and it not ending so well. So
one in particular.
And I remember having a chat with the captain. Actually, they're very approachable, and he goes, the only good ice is the one you put in your drink, sort of thing. He was a Ukrainian guy, actually. So very passionate man. Obviously, his family's going through a lot as well. It was really nice to be able to sort of chat to him and in that way. So it's just a few there. I loved when everyone was out on board, and you just had this beautiful. It was probably one of my favorite days this day, I think. Just with all of the
ocean's like a mill pond there, like it's so still.
And generally speaking, when you're in closer to the continent and you're in good weather, it is pretty calm and it is pretty flat. And you really just have to wait for the boat to go past interesting, like, a second or two later, that would have been not the right alignment, and it wouldn't have worked as a shot. So you kind of have to really be working with timing and just be patient. And there's a thing, I'd call deck time, which is just being out on deck and just taking it all in. And you're not going to get a good shot if you're inside having a cup of tea, or sometimes I'd even skip dinner or ate dinner later when we weren't going through an interesting area. And I think that's a really good idea to do, because you really don't want to be spending time. But I was like, well, when am I going to be back? I don't want to be missing out. So so I really wanted to do that. I quite like these sort of ones, trying to find a nice arrangement of all of the different visual elements and sort of making it all work together. So something like that might edit up well. This one's quite nicely laid out as well. Obviously not final edits or anything. But these are, so generally any black and white shot you'll see is an infrared shot. And the other thing you get to see when you're on deck is you just have these little beautiful moments. Like here we've got a little chin strap penguin sitting there. You can see the resolution's not too shabby. Sitting out there with the scale of it, and you really miss those sort of moments if you're inside, as I was saying. So just ice. I mean, you could take 1,000 different shots like that, just with the different ice details, because everything's so unique and different. I mean, I don't know how you would ever leave, Ben, with all of the I can see a bit of different versions of my edits there, but that's probably a flat. That's probably more like what it came out, and that's after I did a bit of a punch to it. And then this is a good example, actually. This is the color version. So you can sort of see how much more dramatic the infrared really comes out versus.
I actually really love how pastel that color one is. That is,
it's
like, I really liked a few of the more dramatic black and white ones over the color ones before, but I think in this case I really like the color.
Cool.
It's just such beautiful pastel. Really, really nice.
It's got that. It was certainly getting towards the later afternoon, so you're getting that. I probably like that version a bit better of the black and white, just being a bit further out and seeing the ice sheet in the foreground with the light on the mountains behind as well.
Ravine has asked if you got to see any polar bears.
Oh yeah, I don't know if there's too many polar bears down in Antarctica, unfortunately. So it would have been nice, but they are only up in the Arctic. So we do see
a second to click with that as well, actually.
but you do get to see a lot of seals, and particularly these guys as well. A lot of penguins, and I absolutely adore penguins. Like I thought I liked them before, but after seeing their antics and how comical they are, and just the things that they do, like I could just watch them all day. And yeah, it is like a comedy show, really, sometimes just watching them. And certainly I'd say my favorite experiences of my time down there generally involve penguins, or just a really just surreal kind of positioning of where those penguins actually were in the landscape. So you get to visit a lot of bases and see some pretty interesting sort of ways that people used to live. Really like this one of the two guides here, sort of discussing stuff and the amazing light behind, and some pretty sort of surreal, very isolating kind of scenes as well. And I was loving how much detail the IR could bring out as well.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, nice depth. I've got a few more. This is a huge day in terms of, I just adored this like the lower cloud and the mountain behind, which was very interesting shapes and the scale of all of the different elements. So definitely work these up a bit more as well. And then in infrared, it was quite interesting too. Getting the photography group. Yeah, well, I've got a dust spot there I need to get. But yeah, I really love this one too, just the boat and just showing the scale of it. Obviously, it's not as much of a natural shot, but obviously, you get the shot without the boat as well. It's not all about the boat, but in some ways it's you're trying to tell a story of your time there. This is another version of that without a boat too. Some of the ice details, some black and infrared portraits. I think I'm pretty sure he's wearing sunglasses, so you can see straight through them in infrared. It's kind of funny.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah. It just looks straight through sunglasses. It's like they're clear. It's quite kind of bizarre. One of my favorites, I really love this one. This is of a guide, Joel, given the salute as I was shooting. I kind of wish I got that in color, to be honest, but you've got the camera you've got at the time. I quite like this one here too, just telling the story in the light and sort of at the end of the day with them bringing all the zodiacs back in. That's kind of the color version of that there.
I really like that color one too. Just the red against the blue just looks really nice.
Yeah, I've got a few non people ones, but I think in some ways having that scale and interest there actually it just speaks a bit more to me. But it depends on if you're after more of a natural scene or if you're after something else. It's always nice to try and position the birds in certain areas, just to create a bit of interest. And I'm not one that'll add one in here and there, like I know that other people enjoy. If I did, it would be like I took one focused on the bird and one on there, and then I'd blend that for a focus stack. I wouldn't do it to position it so it made the shot work now. I feel like a lot of the enjoyment comes from timing and getting it right. And if you missed out that whole trip, then I guess that's another reason to go back, kind of thing. So that's always my view on it. You get these amazing big icebergs though that have just got the most craziest shapes, and this particular one was pretty astounding. And you can see this amazing archway here, and we got closer and you can kind of line it up with like these intense blue holes. It's actually not rendered. I think it might be because it's an sRGB file, but the blue is just, I remember having to look at the blue and then almost have my laptop there and compare it like in real life, just so I could make sure that I remembered how blue it actually was and not feel like Photoshop or whatever was kind of just taking it way too far. Like it was that kind of blue that you just I've never seen a blue that vivid, like a cobalt. It's a blue you just don't normally see in nature otherwise. And inside of these sort of holes in these glaciers, you just get that most intense color. The other thing I enjoyed doing was actually shooting the polar plunge, because you can actually get right above people. And then this is probably one of my favorite frames. You can just get that moment of impact when they hit the water. And it's kind of a fun event in its own right. But there's a lot of analogies of getting exiting the womb or something like that. It's a very funny kind of thing. This is a couple guide Chris chucking guide Mark in the water, and as people get to know the guides, seeing all of the guides jumping in is always a lot of fun. That's Grant, who's also a guide. And just and this is another favorite of mine, Joel. You'd see the umbilical cord coming in as he's in there. But yeah, so yeah, that's definitely a lot of fun. If you ever go, make sure you I mean it's what you choose to do, but I found it a very enjoyable thing to photograph, actually. But it's also enjoyable to jump in, so don't make that your excuse, although it's probably a pretty good excuse.
Oh, look at that.
This is definitely one of my favorites.
Wow.
Just the layers of the ice, and really if I did this in color, which I think there is a color version, I just think the contrast between the white pieces of ice and the black water is really alluring there. So
yeah, that would look stunning in print.
Yeah, definitely nice to find these areas where you have the ice sitting on the top of the water and really working that up. This was the evening where I saw the midnight sun, so didn't really get a lot of sleep. And with the weather this good, it was definitely the best weather I had for the whole time. You can sort of see. I think the boat sort of docked up, or sort of. I don't think they put anchor. Sometimes they just sort of try to stay in place by kind of using the props and things. They actually camped on here, I believe, that night around here somewhere, which would have been a pretty amazing experience to camp out there. So generally they did a camp. That's actually a pretty good comparison too of infrared and color as well, in terms of I would have just picked up the camera and switched it over. You can see just a very, it's a completely different. This feels like it's a totally different place almost. So it gives you a bit of an idea of the number of people out and about as well. But generally speaking, you know that people don't get in the way as such, because you can just point the other way. There's no one there. You're only ever there's never another boat that turns up, and if you're the boat that's there, then no other boat can come there. In fact, I think the expedition leaders talk with all the other expedition leaders on the other boats to make sure that they don't go to the same places. It's very regulated in terms of how many people can visit a particular place over what sort of time frame, and that gets audited and all sorts. So they have to make sure that so you don't really have that feeling too much of there being other people around, apart from there's the boat holds 200 people, so there's still quite a few people around from that perspective, but in general it's pretty good. So some interesting infrareds here. So every now and then you'll just see a crazy formation that you're just like, I just have to shoot that. Beautiful.
Beautiful.
So that was the sun coming in there, and the sun basically just skimmed along here and then just went back up again. Didn't even set. You mentioned sundogs before. Well, we did get a pretty cool sundog.
Awesome.
I didn't get the timing. It's one of my biggest annoyances was that I didn't have the right camera with me or the lens. I think it was, I only had a long lens. I didn't have a wide lens with me, because normally on the boat you don't need a wide lens. And so I couldn't really fit the whole sundog in. I think this was actually using my 9mm lens, so just really highlights it. But I do have a few other versions. But yeah, it does annoy me that it's not perfectly centered. I even ran down to the end of the boat to try and get a better alignment with the of the sundog, but I just missed the timing, so it's another reason to go back. Beautiful.
Even just like the way the clouds were streaking out from it as well.
Definitely. Wow. And I think the other thing I don't like about it's the foreground. Unfortunately we didn't have that beautiful ice or anything, so it's quite an ugly looking foreground in some ways. So it's sort of like it's cool, but it's not really like getting to that upper echelon sort of thing for me. It could have been, but I did a pretty good job in terms of, it's a little bit soft, but it did a pretty good job in terms of with these long shots of 400 millimeters, because it's a converted sensor. It's an A7R Mark I, so it's a very old camera. So given all of that, I think it's done a pretty good job. I really like this one too. This little archway down here, and I reckon that would be the height of the boat. Is my guess. So like that just gives you a sense of the size of a place like this. And the big lenticular cloud up here as well, beautiful light. So I was thinking, this is going to be a massive infrared trip, but of course the next morning it basically was pretty grey from then on, and we didn't get much sunlight, and so that's kind of like it for the infrared. So it just goes to show that IR, for me, you can try and force IR on, you can try and shoot it when the conditions aren't there. It's just going to look awful. Or it's not awful, but just flat, like there's no contrast or interest there. So so it's like it's one of those things, you have to have it with you, but there are definitely situations where the conditions just aren't right for it. And there was there was entire trips where I basically didn't take any shots. So so that was it. Every now and then, one of my favorite things is you'll come across a especially when you're out on the like on a Zodiac cruise, penguins that are actually on an iceberg, or a little floating bit of ice. They call them bergy bits, and they're just sitting out there like that. And so then you can just go up there, and it's like they're on this little platform that you can just photograph them on, and get up to all of their antics and play around and all of that sort of stuff. So it was really fun to be able to have those situations. I found it a struggle to like know which one to focus on for depth of field and stuff, and it's probably my lack of shooting with long lenses. So that was a bit of a learning. Like you can see here the one in the back's out, so it's like, well, you've got to really consider your f-stops and what you're trying to have in focus, and use that as a storytelling sort of element to things. So that was an interesting learning for me, because I'm not normally shooting long lenses handheld very much in the kind of photos that I do. So it was definitely a huge opportunity to learn taking shots with a longer lens. But then of course you need the wide angles to get these sort of shots as well, because you want to be able to fit in the beautiful vivid colors under the water, and sort of help to show a bit more of a story there as well. So for that reason, I used a 24-105 quite a lot as well, and I very rarely used a wide angle. So normally I'd have a 24-105 on one body and a 100-400 on the other body, and that seemed to work as a pretty good combo. I saw someone had, I think there's a Sigma 70-600 or something, and I was kind of a bit jealous in a way, because you really do, one minute you'll have something really close like that, and then you want to shoot something far away, and if you don't have two bodies, it'd be a nightmare, or you just miss out, I suppose, on the shot too. But I thought in some ways there's a bit of a merit to that. I know that there'd have to be a trade-off for image quality doing that, but it's definitely one of those things where it just did make me realize a bit of brash ice, beautiful. And these are all wide angle. This would be with my 12-24, 13 millimeters. So really trying to sort of show how the boat's there, and I mean, it's kind of nice to have something on the horizon. I obviously have versions as well where there wasn't a boat too, so it's nice to do a natural version and also one that's more storytelling as well. As I mentioned, these are more about storytelling. It's always nice to get a shot where the guide's looking pretty boss there in the back. It makes them feel pretty good. I've got a couple other ones coming up where I really like. You just see these penguins in the most impossible places. Why are they up there? What are they doing there? They're just sitting there hanging out. There's, it's just you just sort of beyond belief sometimes. And the cool thing is, because the Zodiacs are driven by guides that are also photographers, they know instinctively where to place the boat. And I went out a couple of times with non-photographer Zodiac drivers, and they just didn't quite there was benefits to that too, by the way, but which is more around them understanding better the wildlife and where to find the wildlife, but then they wouldn't know necessarily where to position the boat to get the shots. And you don't want to get too pushy about where the boat goes, but the photographers with the photo boat, they were almost like asking, where would you like to go here, would like to go there, and it was just quite an awesome thing to be able to have that. You can see here them dropping. That's how they get the Zodiacs off the back of the boat using these big cranes, and then they'll be dropping them down. And you can see the people in the back here getting ready to, not bad res there too, getting ready to jump on, or they might even be coming back in. I'm not sure. So so that's how that all sort of happens. A few more boat portraits. Probably don't have enough of those jokes. And then more of that. This is what can happen.
Is beautiful in that one just now.
This one here.
Yeah, just the soft glow through the clouds is
you get those sort of conditions and the still reflections and it's pretty amazing. And I think a lot of people don't really that are on board don't really appreciate the light, and they see you getting so excited and they're like, I don't really understand because it's not beautiful and sunny. It doesn't always have to be pretty and sunny. So you get those glassy days. So even though you mightn't have the clouds you can still get a lot of mood and drama. What can happen too is if there's a glacier nearby, it can carve, and then that sort of sets off a bit, like they call it, a tsunami of sorts. And so this is actually quite a high wave as it looks. It's obviously compressed a bit for dramatic effect as well, but it just goes to show that the operations need to be, that they put a lot into it. And this particular beach, they were saying to us, as soon as you get off the Zodiac, just go straight off the shore, because there's always a risk that there might be a big wave coming off of a glacier carving. And sure enough, it actually did happen, and they were ready for that to happen. So it's very well coordinated in terms of looking after people. People don't chase penguins, by the way. It's obviously just compressed there to make it look that way. I really enjoyed this sort of series of shots with the I like to line it up here. There's this beautiful, really deep blue ice cave in the glacier behind, and so getting the beautiful oranges with the blues in the beak is such a startling sort of, I guess, what are they, complementary or opposing? I'm not quite sure. I'm not very good with my color science, but that's a really nice combo. This is this Danko, I think, or Neko? I always get them confused. But you can actually see this feature down here. You've got all these penguins, and then there's these channels here, and the penguins actually form these little superhighways between the colonies, and they're actually quite deep sometimes, which make it for quite interesting photographic opportunities, which you'll probably see a bit later as well. So it was really quite a lot of snow. I was really happy with the amount of snow we had. It wasn't too much, or probably was a bit too much in some cases, but it was enough. But it wasn't too little. I think if you went there and there was too little snow, it could be a bit disappointing. So I thought the amount of snow we had was really good. I love these ones actually as well, as some nice light and just showing. Unfortunately, it does show the smoke, or the exhaust coming out, which probably isn't quite as attractive. This is a really quite an incredulous scene, just with this petrel and a seal. I don't really know why they were hanging out like that together, but I'm sure there's a reason. But it was almost like the seals sort of asking for help with this evil petrel, looking on about to eat him or something. I don't know. Just showing operations getting on and off, and that's how you do it. I like this, but then it kind of looks like the penguin's dead. So you're doing a lot of waiting sometimes for the penguin to actually do what you want it to do, and they have a really good habit of just holding in one position and not actually moving or doing something interesting, and so you're just forever sitting there. You're missing out on another opportunity, so that's always a frustration. But there's a couple shots coming up that will sort of show why it's worth persisting. I really like this one too. get quite a few interesting little buildings and huts around the place, which can make for good subjects. A few whales about as well. So no shortage of whales.
What would be the sort of dominant whale species in that area?
Oh, definitely humpbacks, but there's also southern rights and minkies and orcas as well. Didn't really get a great shot of an orca the whole time. I mean, they are pretty hard to shoot because they, the orca sightings aren't particularly common, and they don't normally come up too close. But we did have a scenario where they were hunting a humpback, which was quite a rare thing to see.
Oh, wow.
And they actually have onboard whale experts and bird experts, and the whale experts were losing their shit. So I knew that it was must have been a pretty good thing to see. They couldn't work out if they killed the baby humpback or not, but they definitely, it was sort of, it's very rare to see that sort of predatory behavior like that. So
I was slight side note is I was watching the Frozen Planet 2 that came out towards the end of last year, David Attenborough. And in the first episode, there's this videos of like orcas pack hunting this seal, and they're using like coordinated tail movements to create waves to knock seals off the ice and all this kind of stuff. And I was saying that not even all orcas know how to do that. There's like maybe about 200 in the world that have developed that advanced techniques. Wow. They're just such incredibly intelligent animals.
Yeah, there's just so many amazing things that we don't even know about what they get up to, and how and some of the smart things that they can actually do. I love the sense of scale, just showing how massive the actual boat is. There was a few COVID cases on board, so that was an interesting thing to kind of manage, but thankfully it didn't go across the whole ship. And so if anyone got COVID, they actually had to sort of isolate them in a room for I think it was a few days. So there was a case where people just arrived to Antarctica and got COVID, and then basically had COVID for the whole time we're in Antarctica, down, and then when we turned around to go back, then they could come out again. So it was pretty rough for some people that way. And my friend and guide Espen, who was the expedition photographer, managed to get sick as well, and so I was able to help him out with a few time-lapse videos and things, which was really cool, because they have a big slideshow presentation at the end of the voyage to sort of show what happened. And so the expedition's photographer's job's kind of to capture photographs, kind of like I have in a way. Might be a job I could do in the future, hint hint. But their job is to show what happened on the trip, and so but he was still able to tell a story. This is going through the Lemaire Channel, so you can sort of see the big huge cliffs on either side, and got up on the bridge as well just to get a different perspective going through. Pretty stunning, and it's really fun having a wide angle lens where you can actually go right out and fit in a whole bunch of elements. I like that as well. I love being able to go to 12 millimeters to do that, which is bloody wide on a full frame. I'll try and show. I don't have too much longer before we hit the end of show time, but just show a few of my more favorite shots that I took during the time. I'm sort of gotten through most of it. It's interesting actually, because the weather was so good on the first trip. I've really only just I'm on the sort of midway through the second trip now, basically. So the second trip the weather was considerably more cloudy, but I mean, I couldn't say that one was better than the other in some ways, because you just see different things. And even though the weather mightn't be there, I definitely took some of my favorite shots on this trip. And then had one of my favorite experiences was actually I was up on deck, and this happened. A whale just basically came through straight under the front of the boat. And I just happened to have, I had my camera there and was able to get a few shots of it as it went under. So it's pretty rare to actually be able to see it from up there. And I think there was only 2 or 3 of us actually up on deck at the time. So it was pretty cool to be able to witness that. And for me, it was just like, oh yeah, that's why you go up on deck, so you can get these sort of moments. And then like a little penguin isolated on the way back to the boat there. and then these awesome lenticular clouds on the way home. It was kind of
That.
brutal in a way. The sun kind of came out, and we got this moment of sunshine and these amazing clouds just as we we're leaving. It was kind of like, oh,
Yeah.
it's like it was a bit of a kind of a nice thing for the folks that were on that trip, but I kind of knew that how much they missed out on in terms of the tops of the mountains and how much more grandeur there actually was there. So this is now back in dock. I'm about to go back on for the third time and see, as I mentioned earlier, you're really only getting off the ship at about kind of 9 or 10 o'clock. I think the guests were getting off a bit earlier than that, but I was helping with stuff, and then I had to track down cameras and make sure all the cameras were there and no one had walked off with a camera or anything like that.
Yeah.
So you've got maybe 2 or 3 hours to go into Ushuaia and buy a few things, and you're on land for 3 or 4 hours maybe at the most, and then you back off. So for a month I probably was on land for less than 8 hours, something like that. So you're not really back very much, which is okay, because you that once you get used to being on the boat, and that's just like just like home. And it's not like you have sea legs either when you get back on land. I found it like it was just because the boat's so stable. I didn't really feel that too much. Others might disagree. So this is the last trip. So you kind of, it's a bit of similar things. So we had the polar plunge again. But this time it was actually in the snow, so I really enjoyed. I had a few other frames which I don't think I've included, but actually playing with because so many people jump off, you can kind of play with different techniques and shutter speeds and getting the snow streaking as part of the shot. So with the person moving in midair at the same time is kind of fun. I really like these sort of ones when the penguins walk up the superhighway. You get them lining up, and you can just sort of pick the moments where they're lifting their foot or have an interesting positioning of their wings, and the sort of 3 in a row there as well really helps. Or this guy sort of, I don't know, gesturing to come forward or something like that. So you can sort of really anthropomorphize what they get up to and what they do, which can be quite cool to do. What else do I have here? There's this is one of my favorite shoots, I think. Before we get that, every now and then you get like an iceberg that just goes through that looks a bit like a flotilla, or like to me this reminded me of like a float that would go down like a parade or something like that. It was quite interesting. But this day was pretty cool. Just was snowy, and we went up to a chinstrap colony, which is a kind of penguin they've got up there. There's a few different species that they can see, but got some really nice portraits of my friend Andrew, who was also one of the photo program guides. And so there's a bit of a hero pose there in the snow with the people coming up behind. And then this is the guide Kate as well, who's an Aussie. Andrew is from Canada. Just pretty nice. I think in the other excuse me, I think I did have some other shots from that one there there was an amazing fight there between 2 chin straps. So I was really lucky to capture those guys going hard at it, and a bit of drama. But really, it's one of my favorite shots from the trip, just being able to capture that. And I was a bit worried my shutter speed was a bit too low, but it actually came up okay. And in some ways, I think if I froze the motion, I think it's just enough. Like you almost want to have a little bit of motion just to show the drama. Like if it's totally frozen, then
conveys it better.
And also I mean, it might freeze the snow so that's not quite so blurry, but I thought I had a bit of a think about it, and then I was able to talk myself into feeling okay about that. So
I like it. I like it. Bit of action.
And then this one here was pretty cool with the timing as well. It's a bit of an ugly foreground though in terms of the poos and everything around, but that is part of a penguin colony after all. But it's really, I could see this guy sitting on this rock here, and I knew that he looked like he was about to jump. So you just have to sit there and wait sometimes, and it was sort of interesting to practice being patient and trying to time those sort of things happening. Yeah, so and then I'll probably just finish up with a few whale shots. I mean, I didn't really get any shots where there was whales with fireworks, or like they were jumping out, or my friend Jay got an amazing one with the whales blowing up their spray, and it was backlit by the light that they had. So
even just that simple fluke shot there is really nice. I really like that.
Yeah, I quite like this one too, with the colors that were going on. And then there was also a really awesome seas on this particular day as well. With I definitely thought of you on this day. I was like, oh, Ben would just be shooting the water all day today.
Yeah, those water textures, like just those smooth ripples, like, and as a foreground, they work so well.
Yeah, it was very it was, I was taking a lot of shots of the water that day. So it was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's the last shot I've got to show. But yeah, basically that's what I've got. So I'm sorry if it was a bit it wasn't really categorized or put together in any sort of meaningful way. Realistically too, I do know that a lot of the shots that I've shown aren't really my best ones as well. I definitely have had a couple more sort of wildlife or different scenes that I've want to spend a bit of time on and actually do a proper edit on, rather than just sort of do the cursory, move a few sliders or paste a preset that I've made over the top and be okay with that. So
that's the same with 90% of the ones I showed. Besides the 4 that I've shared, everything was just a very, very quick, preset edit for the delivery to Chimu. Most of those are not a reflection of the final product, but more just showing what we've got up to, which I suppose is what more the episode was about. It's just showing the experience of Antarctica, both from the air and the sea, and the land. So it was really cool. Really cool to just see what it's like beyond a fine art photo or a really nice print, just what it's like just actually being there in person. And some of those behind the scenes sort of style shots, I think are great for storytelling. Really, really cool to see it.
Oh, thanks, Ben. Yeah, it was definitely a joy to share that with everyone. And if you do have any questions on YouTube, just feel free to put them through. But I mean, there's plenty of information out there. If you'd like to travel to Antarctica yourself, I certainly would recommend traveling with Intrepid. A little bit biased there, perhaps. Certainly recommend Sony cameras. No, but in general, it's a pretty cool experience. No pun intended. And but it's a hell of a long way to go. So it's definitely nice to think about potentially returning as well and working down there again. Because one thing that I can say is, if you do get a chance to go, it's a sort of place that you'll and one of the guides said this, and I so agree with it, is that if you do go down there, you'll never be the same again, because you just see things down there that I used to say the most beautiful place in the world was a certain part of Tasmania, but I don't know if I can say that anymore, unfortunately. After being to Antarctica, it's definitely hard for me to say that. So some of the things and the scenes that you see are really hard to go past. So I hope I've been able to convey at least some of that through the shots tonight. And feel free to reach out to me too if you've got any questions about it all. And I think we can probably leave it there. I'll just double check YouTube for anything. I think that's it. So thanks so much everyone for joining tonight, and we'll be back again in a couple of weeks as per usual. And I think you'll be hearing from us then. So until then, catch you later. And until next time. Good night.
Hey everyone. Thanks for tuning in. See ya.
See ya.